likes the same thing you like, looks like your mother, looks like your father. Maybe, you know, if one of your parents or grandparents passed on, is named after your grandmother. You know, what we call the biases that make us favor these children. And today our conversation is around how do we be conscious around these dynamics of one child or two children being favored, and what are some of the factors that make us favor children. So basically, favoritism, as you know it can happen even at work. There are people who are more favored than others. And when you bring this home, it's a whole other dynamic where children sometimes are of the same mother, the same father, and sometimes actually those family dynamics around, like if maybe as a mother I came with a child and then I've had other children with my husband, then it means that I might favor my child, or my husband might favor his children, and maybe my child gets the shorter end of the stick. So favoritism leads to both short-term and long-term effects. And some of these things we actually don't even realize how they affect us until later in life. So I think just in terms of definition, it can be one or both parents who favor one child or two children. It can be both obvious or implied or subtle, where maybe obvious is where every time you need something done, you have a gift, you always present it to one child. And then subtle is where maybe you sneak favors in the background, and sometimes you even tell this favorite child not to tell the other children, that don't tell them I took you for ice cream, because you know I love you more than the rest. Yeah? And the conversation we're having today is, how does it affect both the favored child and the children who are unfavored? Because both children actually get affected. I've seen this also play out in schools, where the school picks the smarter children, the A students, and puts them in one class, and then picks the B and C students and puts them in another class. And I've had all kinds of reasons. They say we want the school performance to be better because we're putting the best performing children together. And then sometimes they also say it's because we want certain teachers to focus on the B children and the C children, and the A children will have different teachers. But what really happens when you separate maybe two kids who are friends, and now suddenly you have to explain to your friend why you've been moved? And sometimes the children have figured it out, or sometimes they haven't. And it's, wait, you're the one who's been helping me with my math, but you've been moved to another class. So who's gonna help me now with my math? So the possibility of that child who's unfavored doing worse is actually higher. And even the child who's favored and taken to the A class might actually be emotionally affected and not do as well as they would have. So we'll dive into this. I think just before I kick off, I'm gonna invite Stacy to just do a brief presentation of the questions we will use for this session, and then maybe post the community link for those who are not members, so that you can access the poll, and that's what we'll use to guide the conversation tonight. Stacy, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar. So I'll be posting the community link here on the chat, as well as the questions. So you will find the questions once you join our community via the community link. Mm-hmm. So I will also be posting the poll questions there, and then we will read out the answers after. Thank you.
Good. So maybe as we, if you're already a community member, you'll just be able to access the question and do your poll. For those who are not, just go ahead as she said. I just wanted to talk a bit more around the favoritism and how it shows up. Sometimes it's the child who's favored, when they do something very small that's positive, they get a lot of praise. And then the child who's not favored, on the flip side, when they do something bad or something negative that's very small, they get reprimanded, quite, harshly. So that's, you might not even notice that that's a thing in terms of favoritism, but that's how sometimes it shows up. And favoritism is also how a child ends up feeling. Yeah? So if I feel that my parents favor the other child and I am the unfavored child, then of course it matters. And maybe if I don't communicate that to the parents and they continue doing the same thing, then it's going to mean that I grow up as the unfavored child, with or without me communicating the same, and with or without the intention of the parent actually wanting to make me feel the way I'm feeling. So it's I guess you could argue that being favored is debatable, but it really just, it's about having these conversations and knowing how your children process these things. And it doesn't mean that it only happens with siblings. It can be a grandmother with the grandchildren. I've heard of stories like, because my auntie has a lot of money and she has a big car, her children get better treatment when we go to grandma's. So grandma usually asks us to sit on the floor and these children sit on the couch. Or we get the plastic plates and the other children get the enamel plates. These are things that they might be in our blind view as parents, grandparents, but then they're being experienced by the children as favoritism or lack of, being the favored or unfavored child. So Stacy, you'll just check for me if the polls are in so that we can go over the first question. If yes, please just go ahead and read it out loud. Thank you, Stacy. Karibu sana, Francis.
Just a moment. I'm posting the questions in a few.
Okay. All right. So as Stacy is posting, maybe in the chat, we could just, it can be, you can just put a comment. Are you the favored child or are you the unfavored child? Or are you in the scenarios which are the best where you don't feel as a favored or unfavored child? And by the way, it has nothing to do with what people think. Sometimes people might think you're the favored child, but you feel you are the unfavored child. So let's see in the chat, who's a favored child or who's an unfavored child? This is by our parents, before we go to our children as parents. So I'll just look at the chat. Access the chat for me. Karibu sana Vayo. Karibu Lilian. Oh, that's really nice. You feel like, you know what? You probably are in the favored child group. Okay, good for you, Francis. Okay, Amy is not sure. She feels different in different situations. That's also true. Like, it's a bit confusing. Sometimes you're like, I think I'm being favored here. Then other times you're like, I think the other sibling is being favored. And it can get dicey because you're like, wait, which is which? More responses as we access the poll. More responses. Kendi, do you feel like you are the favored child or the unfavored child? You can also unmute and speak. Honestly, Amy, I kind of feel like you. I feel like sometimes I'm confused and I don't know if it's just how I'm processing things sometimes. I used to feel favored sometimes, then I would feel unfavored. Okay, you're okay in between. Yeah. It's like there's some things you seem to shine, then there are other things you're like, wait, the vibe I'm picking is I'm not being favored here. And it's just like the backgrounds we've grown up in, which like if like, let me say, for us Africans, food is a thing, you know? So when we grew up and chicken was slaughtered and my mom would have the whole sufuria of the chicken, it was under tight security. And then she would start picking the plates, these like plastic bowls. And when she picks a plastic bowl and you just see she's put a drumstick, and then she would call a name. So she'd be like, X here. And everybody's eyes just follow the plate and you see a drumstick. So right there, you know you might be getting a wing. And by the way, talking of chicken, that's how I ended up loving the neck. Because I think I kept being given the neck. So to this date, when I slaughter chicken, I eat the neck and people ask me why. But I really, really think I used to be given the neck. Now I think I'm in the unfavored children. Yeah. So yeah, food is a thing. Or if thankfully, like where we grew up, the ugali, you just attacked it and your speed is what sideared you, you know. You come from this side, we come from this side. But then if it was ripe bananas, for example, so you know the bananas are small and big, and you could see we're 5 and they're just 5 bananas, and my mom just picks the biggest banana and calls my brother and says, here, everybody have 1 banana. The whole time I'm thinking, no, you just gave him the biggest banana and you're giving me the smallest banana. And she would have, stories to accompany that favoritism sometimes. Oh, ndio mdogo, ndiye anafaa akue. Or things like, oh, you don't like bananas anyway. Or, stuff like that. So Stacy, do we have any responses that we can go to? I'm also gonna love hearing from the favored children, because I think I've decided, Karibu Kenny, I've decided I'm in the unfavored children. Stacy, just check that we have some responses. If you haven't joined the community, we do?
Yes, we have some responses. I'm posting the last 2 questions.
Okay. So you can just read for us the first question, the summary of the first question, so we can delve into it a bit.
Okay, so the first question is, do you believe favoritism among children is inevitable in parenting?
Mm-hmm.
One has said yes, and one has said not sure.
Okay, let's have a few more responses. There's only 2 responses, Stacy?
Yes, only 2.
Okay, let's have a few more. If you haven't accessed the poll or you just joined, in the chat, there is a community link, and then you access the poll and you just indicate if you believe favoritism among children is inevitable in parenting. So some have said yes, it's natural, and another has said they're not sure. Is it inevitable? Can you really avoid favoring children? Is it something maybe we can work on? Is it maybe a pendulum? Like, we can try and be in the middle or towards the side of not favoring? Or is the solution having 1 child? Does it mean when you have 1 child, maybe you don't have this problem? Karibu Biko. Karibu Sana. Thank you guys for joining. we are just discussing this thing around favoritism and how it has affected some of us even in our adult years, and how we found out some of the cards we were served, basically the things that, if you're those people who got the clothes that were hand-me-downs, and then your elder brother or elder sister always got the new clothes, and the excuse was because they're older. So you always got the hand-me-down, and then they got something new. Yeah? Even at Christmas, you're just told, yeah, I'm Toshi, so you're going to have that, tutamnunulia mpya. Yeah? Or do you think that you feeling that you're the unfavored child is it because of your birth order? Like, are you favored because you're a last-born child? Are you unfavored because you're a firstborn and your parents were really, really hard on you? Or what do you think? So is it inevitable in parenting, both for us as parents and also for our parents? Stacy, do we have a few more responses? For the first question. Admit Mercy.
We have one more response.
Okay. Okay, so now we have how many? Yes, 1, and not sure 2, or the reverse? Stacy, is the poll saying leaning towards yes or no, or not sure? Let's have a few more people do the poll. Yes, Stacy?
For the first question, one response is yes, and we have 2 with not sure.
Okay, I think we can discuss it so we can move on to the other bits. So, do you believe favoritism among children is inevitable in parenting? My answer is, I think I'm not sure, but I really do believe that as human beings, in all the spaces we're in, the biases will always be there. And so I believe it can be avoided. Yeah. But I also believe that it can naturally show up as a human being. You will tend to favor people who look like you. Some of the reasons I gave is you'll favor that first child who validated you as, as a wife or as a husband, or, when there was pressure, the pressure was grandpa needed to be named, and you're the child that was born, and you now sort of took the place of grandpa or grandma. So I believe that, especially for us in the African culture, I'm not so sure about the other cultures, that in a way, this is something we have to be conscious about. And this is actually why we're having this conversation today. Personally, in my life, I have felt, that I'm the unfavored child. I don't know how my siblings see me, but I've always felt that I was the unfavored child. For the record, I'm the 8th of my mother's 9 children. So there was this tiny little bits where I would be told, you're the last born girl, or, of course I got candy and all these fancy things from my elder siblings. But in my adult years, mostly I felt that I was the unfavored child. So there is no right answer. Again, this is just more of a perspective. But again, this conversation is around how do we become more conscious as parents to avoid maybe the favoritism or the unfavoritism we experienced showing up again in our children, because these are things that can be carried on. Remember, we do parent from the places we were parented. So if we're not conscious around these things, we'll end up doing the same things or parenting the same ways that we were parented. So I'm going to go to the second question. Have you ever felt that one of your children perceives you as favoring their siblings? Maybe the child just sulked, or they verbalized and said, Mom, Dad, you don't love me as much as you love my brother or my sister. Or how come you don't, love me? I remember one time my son asked me why my daughter had so many pairs of shoes and he only had, I think, maybe like 4. I think my daughter had like 10 or 11. And I froze. I didn't know what to say. And it's bothered me to this date. So, of my firstborn and secondborn, I've experienced those things of sometimes the firstborn feels I favor the secondborn. I don't know if the secondborn, I feel like the secondborn has also expressed that I favored the firstborn. Like when he asked why my daughter had so many pairs of shoes. And so some of these things are not things you would have noticed. Or he even asked me why my daughter had so many pairs of pieces of underwear and socks. But he was basically looking for his 1, 2, 3 pairs. But most of the time it's because he would lose his socks when he went to school and stuff like that, and we were not replacing them as fast. But yeah, I've gotten, in my 19 or so years of parenting, I've gotten these instances where I didn't have an answer. So have you ever felt that one of your children perceives you as favoring their siblings? Option 1 is yes, often. Yes, but rarely. No, never, which would be great. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that maybe the perception hasn't been visible to you. You might even end up learning from an aunt or an uncle who is told that mom likes my sister or my brother more than me later in life. So, Stacy, if you could just check for me if that question has been answered.
Yes, we have 4 responses.
Mm-hmm.
One has said very often,
Mm-hmm.
and 3 have said very often,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 has said rarely.
Okay. So I think this really makes the point where we need to be conscious about this thing, because as you can see, the majority of us have actually had those moments where your child perceives you as favoring their sibling. Again, it is said as perceived because maybe sometimes, let me give an example. So your daughter just started her period and you come home holding a package of pads and sort of like a self-care pack. And your son goes, how come I don't get a pack? In your mind, you're thinking, well, your sister is on her period. And then sometimes in the African culture, we don't talk about it. So you just pass the package and then your daughter just disappears to the bedroom with it. But probably the right thing to do is to sit them down and say, every once a month, your sister gets her period and I get to buy her a self-care pack, which you do not need or require. So then that would help your son understand that he's not being the unfavored child. It's that your daughter needs this package. But then that's more like what you would feel was perceived as favoritism. But then there's obvious ones where you have a daughter and every day you bring something girly. You bring a doll, you bring something pretty pink, it could be a hairband, and your son never gets anything. And he's wondering, you could have gotten me a toy car. So some of this is actually a bit obvious that you're favoring one child. And so we need to be conscious of how we then we have our children perceiving some of the things that we're doing. Or when you sit at the table, the order of how you sit. So I remember when my kids were young, they would come into my bed and they would be like, I've booked to sleep next to mommy. And then the other one would say, no, I booked first. So I remember telling them, no, I have 2 sides. So you can be on my right and you can be on my left. And they still argued, talking about, no, I wanted the right side. No, that was my side. So what happens when one gets the right side? Then, the other one was feeling unfavored. So some of these things are things, sometimes if you don't discuss them, you'll actually not know. But I really appreciate the fact that we're being honest and saying, yes, quite often you get one child perceiving you as favoring their sibling. And what can we do about it? So anyone who would like to comment about that? Anyone? It can be something in the chat, just about the two questions we discussed. So if your answer was no, never, you need to just investigate that a bit more and reflect on it. And this could be things that are there, but they're in your blind view. Or you could be one of the, the 1 or 2% that has never had this situation happen to them. And like I said, if you have an only child, you probably might end up in this situation where then it's the bigger family, where maybe if your siblings have 3 kids and you have 1 child, every time your child shows up in family events, they seem to get better treatment and the other children don't, because maybe they're an only child and they are pampered, and so everybody in the family seems to follow that trend of pampering them. So the third question, what do you think is the biggest cause of perceived favoritism in parenting? So the first thing is birth order, so firstborn versus lastborn. The second one is personality differences, the quiet child, the loud child, or the introvert versus the extrovert. Academic or extracurricular achievements, very, very big in our culture. The A student, the B student, the D student. And then special needs or health conditions, that's also a big one. Where you have a child who actually needs more attention because they are born as a special child. And then there could be other which you can comment in the chat. So those seem to be one of the obvious ones. So firstborn sometimes get the parents when they're very harsh. I honestly think I was very harsh with my daughter, and I was a bit gentle with my son because I was a better mom second time around. So birth order, and for those of you who are from big families like mine, then are you a lastborn and you're favored, or do you feel unfavored because kila mtu anakuonea because you're a lastborn? Yeah. Sometimes firstborns also feel unfavored because a lot of responsibility is placed on them. And that's why sometimes they're known as the third parent. The other dynamic I've seen is also, karibu sana, Leonard. The other dynamic is the middle child. So you have a firstborn and a middle one, like Kendi for you, and then you have a lastborn. So the lastborn always gets that lastborn treatment. Oh, baby, come sit on my lap. Let the baby eat first. And then the firstborn always gets, okay, you're the one in charge, so take charge. So the middle child is like, okay, where does that leave me? Okay, so we have the baby who can be touched, and then we have the firstborn who's ordering me around, and it's supposedly my boss. So what happens to me? I end up feeling unfavored. So that's in terms of birth order. Personality differences is sometimes as a parent, if you're a quiet, introverted, maybe artistic person, and you have one child who's just like that, then you tend to favor that child. Say, kuja, wewe ndio unanifanana, come sit here. Let's do our thing. Let's do our puzzles. Let's draw. Let's go to the museum. Wachana na hao wengine. Hawataki kwenda museum. How often do you catch yourself doing these things? And then, so personality could be anything. It could be even, like I said earlier, someone who behaves so much like your mom. So you always say, oh, I love you, mama, because you're just like my late mom. You're so this, that. And then if a child is like your dad, maybe they are strict or anything that didn't work well for you, then they end up being an unfavored child. Then academic, yeah, a big one, a really big one, because you find the A students, the B students, and this is happening in school, even in church. Like that one child who can memorize all the Bible verses is always favored by the teacher in church, yeah? But how do we look at this and consciously realize that we're all blessed differently? I might be quiet and I can do certain things better than others. I might be loud and I can do other things better than others, so that we leverage on each other's strengths or on each child. So that we don't favor one child because they are an A student in math and the other one who's an A student in English anaambiwa we English itakupeleka wapi? what we want is mathematics. You should be like your brother. Yeah? When you take them to the same school, you're told, even the teacher sometimes will tell you, how come you're not smart like your brother? Your brother used to be number one, or your brother is number one. And you just end up feeling like, whoa, okay, so I'm never going to be me. I'm just always going to be so-and-so's brother. And even in our adult lives, how many of you have been met by people who said, oh, that's your brother. Na wewe ni nini likufanyikia? Like, what happened to you? Even things like, let me find a good one. You're light-skinned and someone else is dark-skinned. In the same family, maybe one is like mom, one is like dad. And then people always say, we uko light-skinned, uko msupu, kwani what happened to your brother? And your brother is right there. Yeah? So those are just some of the things we need to be aware. Special needs. You have an autistic child. They need a lot of attention. They need you to follow them around. What happens to the other children? They feel ignored. You can imagine the children are young. They don't understand what's autism. They don't understand what the other child is going through. How often do we sit with the other children and support the child who is a special needs child together, so that you do it as a family and they get to reconcile why this child is getting better treatment than them? Could even be a special school. You've taken a dyslexic child to a different school, and the other kids are taken to this school, and they keep feeling like they get the better school, we don't. Why? And then, because sometimes as a parent, you're protecting both children, you don't want to explain to these ones why this one is getting treated this way, and now they end up clashing with each other. And the last one is... actually, those are the main four ones. Birth order, personality differences, academic or extracurricular. Someone who's very sporty and you keep telling them, well, when you're footballer, we're going to get rich one day because you're going to go and play for Arsenal or Man U. So how many times as a parent do you vocalize these things, and how do you make the other children feel? So, Stacy, if you could just check for me what the poll answers are. I would like to see if most of us think one reason is a bigger one than the other. Stacy?
We have 3 responses, and all of them have said personality differences.
Wow. So that's a big one. And I know even for those of you who have not answered, you will be drawn to that child who's like you, or father, that child who is like someone you really loved and lost them maybe a while ago. Could be a sister, a brother, and you named the child after them and they're just like them. So personality differences is a big one, because the bias actually is in your blind view. You don't even realize, you're just drawn to that person. The ones that are more obvious, maybe you're able to manage them, like academics. So I think personality differences actually wins. So if you'll allow me, we'll move to the 4th question. How do you try to ensure fairness among your children? Do you spend equal time with each child? Do you give equal rewards and discipline? Do you understand and acknowledge their unique needs? Or generally, do you struggle with this? Stacy, how many responses do we have? For those who joined late, just check in the chat. There's a community link. And I think, Stacy, you'll just repost all the questions there, together, just for record. But we're just discussing, how do you try to ensure fairness among your children? And some of these strategies can work better for certain families than for others. Stacy?
We have 3 responses, and one has said giving equal rewards and discipline, and 2 have said understanding and acknowledging their unique needs. Actually 3. We have one more response.
So understanding and acknowledging their unique needs. And then you said one said giving equal rewards.
Yes.
Okay. I honestly think that all of them are good answers. Like I said, you'll find different scenarios work for different families or different kids. There are situations like the part for chicken parts. I feel like me being given the neck was unfair and other people getting the drumstick. So, you know, you also have to look at the situation where we are. So I feel like understanding and acknowledging each child's unique needs is really important, but also communicating the same to the other children. So what if you had a meeting and everybody said, how are we winning this week? And everybody gets to describe what winning looks like. So for me, it could be waking up on time and being able to eat breakfast and ready for school. For another, it could be finishing my homework on time. For another, it could be making my bed. So these are 3 different wins for the week. And for each of them, they get to describe what reward they would want. So one might say, I want to go for ice cream. The other one says, I want to watch a movie on Netflix. And the other one says, I'd like to visit grandma. So the discussion is basically, how do you get these kids to be, karibu sana Bet, how do you expect these kids to be on the same page around how they feel about how the other one has been rewarded? And that's why we always say, try and have family meals together, because these are times when you get to discuss these things and you get to pick the children's brains and see how they're thinking. It's very important to know how do they perceive certain things. Let's give another example. Whoever drives their kids to school, when you're going in the morning, the order of how they sit. So who sits in the front, who sits at the back, and who sits in the middle. If mommy or daddy sits at the back, who gets to sit with mommy? What do you consider a reward? Is it, I get to sit with mommy at the front this week? Do other people want that? Yeah, and you've seen in corporate environments, sometimes you'll see they give us the same reward every week. So it's just passed on. Like, and I know teachers do this too. So you pass on the reward the whole week. Stacy, do you want to mute just for a little bit? In view of time, I'm just going to move to the last 2 questions. How do you think favoritism affects children in the long run? It lowers self-esteem and creates resentment. It motivates them to seek approval. It has little to no long-term impact, or I'm not sure. So, Stacy, I don't know how we're looking in the poll.
We have 3 responses.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them have said it lowers self-esteem and creates resentment.
That is very true. And it's interesting to note that it could actually happen to both the favored and the unfavored child. Because sometimes what looked like being favored can end up turning against you. Let me think of an interesting example. So when you were small, you used to be let to go and sleep. And then because you're the weaker child who's really tired, so it looked like a favor and you felt favored. Then as you grow up, you realize your siblings are doing better, their grades are better, they're managing in school better. So you can't even go to boarding school because apparently, you know, you need to stay home close to mom. And you start feeling like you're the unfavored child. Because now what was a favor has turned around and looks like it's not a favor anymore, because you're wondering, how come everybody is doing better than me? And how come they're being let to go to, I mean, in my time, boarding school was a privilege. So, you know, and I know right now it's not a privilege for our kids, but yeah, going to boarding school when you grew up in the village meant you didn't wake up to go to the shamba. I didn't have to pluck tea. I didn't have to milk the cows. I didn't have to fetch firewood. And I didn't have to look for vegetables along the road. So going to boarding school was a big deal. Yeah. So today, back, I digress. There's the option of it has little to no long-term impact. I don't believe so. It motivates them to seek approval. I don't think it's really being motivated to seek approval, because part of these things have affected some of us in the long term, where you're always seeking approval even in the wrong places, and you always feel like you're never good enough because you are that child who never seemed validated by your parents. So even in your adult life, you're doing great, but you never feel like it's good enough because you're stuck in that mode of always seeking approval. So I wouldn't say it motivates you to seek approval. So lowering self-esteem and creating resentment for me is a big one. And this is why we need to look at these things right from when the children are small. The last question, would you be open to learning strategies to prevent favoritism in parenting? Stacy, what do we have?
We have 2 responses, and all of them have said yes, they are open to learning strategies to prevent favoritism in parenting.
Okay, and I think this is really big for us, because sometimes we've looked at strategies, but then I would say, like I said earlier, these things could work for one family but not for the other. I'll give an example. Who has maybe 1 girl and 3 boys? Yeah. So how you will treat this girl that doesn't make the boys feel, favored or unfavored is going to be different than someone who has 2 girls. So some of these strategies are going to work, and we need to just look at which ones work better for us and which ones do not work. And sometimes it's only when we tried. But I wanted to also talk about a little bit more about how it impacts the favored child, which is not something that's obvious. Usually the favored child feels entitled. They might even struggle with genuine accomplishments because they've been this golden child. And sometimes they even become insecure because every environment they show up in, they sort of have an expectation to be treated a certain way. And when it's not coming, then they start feeling insecure. And this could be in work environments. And you might even wonder why somebody at work behaves a certain way, only for you to find out that they are a favored child at home. And then on the unfavored child, of course, we've talked about resentment, inadequacy, low self-esteem. And this can even affect the relationships, both for spouses and siblings and even parents, both short and long term. And I think the one thing that, at least for me in my family, is I noticed that in terms of the siblings now, there was very stiff competition, almost unhealthy, competition, and even rivalry, where people start having these arguments of, we hata upendwi, mi ndio napendwa. Did you see how mom gave me 100 shillings and you were given 50, And then, these conflicts can actually even be carried on even to your children, where, you find children discussing and saying, grandma prefers my dad, grandma doesn't talk to your dad, or when we visit grandma, we get better treatment. Whatever that looks like for you in your family, depending on your family dynamics, then it's going to affect how these things manifest. If we can just quickly address how to first show, how do you notice that there is favoritism? So if you're giving one child more attention, more praise, more privileges, and this could be food, rewards, time, anything, bigger room, if you have strict ideals for one child, but not for the other. So one child, you say, you must make your bed, but for the other one, you don't even talk about it. Using one child as a benchmark, always saying, you have to do it like John, okay? John, can you show them how to do it? Meanwhile, these other children are gifted differently. Also, one child is always showing off. to the other children. Oh, look at what I've been bought for. Or mom said that I should tell you guys this, that. Dad has called me because I'm the one who, I'm the favored child. Yeah. So those are some of the signs of parental favoritism. And the consequences we have discussed can actually reduce trust and credibility for parents. And so I think one of the things we need to be mindful of is our family dynamics, being mindful of our words even. Just words, like I think I remember one child saying how you refer to them. They're both girls, so you call one by their name, but the other one you call mommy or mama. And the parent never realized that it was a thing, but just words, or the things you say about how you make a big deal when the child who has gotten a C gets a C, but the other child who got a B, because they are an A student, you don't make a big deal out of it. So I think some of these things is let's try to give equal attention where it's possible, but more importantly, let's learn who our children are. And if you can do this in a group setting, it can be trivia where everybody gets to say their favorite thing, or what does reward mean to them. If maybe you have rooms and you have 5 rooms, one is bigger, one is has a window, one doesn't. Maybe you could do things like ballot boxes where you put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and everybody gets to choose. And whoever chooses room 5 takes room 5. Yeah. Even taking turns. So if it's a favorite chair, or whoever sits next to mommy or next to daddy, rotate that chair. If I feel that you're favoring the one child who keeps sitting next to you, can we rotate? And this week I sit next to mommy, next week you sit next to mommy, and so and so. So these are things that we need to discuss in our home setups, because again, our homes are different. How do we avoid the conflict? How do you even resolve conflict? There was this thing of when the children do something wrong and the firstborn is caned. Alafu anaambiwa, wewe ndio mkubwa. Why didn't you tell the children not to do the wrong thing? Meanwhile, the child who's being caned is like 6 years old. They don't know better. So how do we resolve our conflicts? And how is it perceived by our kids that we are favoring one child and not the other? Yeah. And one thing we've discussed this in other sessions is around beating children. I hope that it's not a thing, like we don't beat our children. And I hope consequence management is something we embrace. So some of the consequences that you're going to give one child might not work for the other. Like my son used to like playing outside, so I knew the consequence for him was to ground him. But for my daughter, she was an indoors person, so I had to find different things on how to manage her consequences when she did something wrong. And favoritism shows up both in negative spaces and positive spaces. So how you praise and how you reprimand. So I think the conclusion for us today is, how as parents can we consciously parent our children in a way that is they don't perceive as being the favored child or the unfavored child? Again, if it's something that the children already perceive so, let's work on strategies on how to reduce that perception. So if one child thinks that you keep buying this one clothes, try and change and buy the other one clothes too. Let it not be that one child only gets hand-me-downs. Yeah. If it's in family gatherings and you feel that one of your sisters or brothers treats one of your children better, have a discussion with that sister or brother and say, my other children are feeling this type of way. Could you help me in making sure that you treat them the same? Or I didn't appreciate when you said that this child is better than these children, because that hurts the feelings of these other ones. So I think there's very small things that we could do on a daily basis. Some of them might work, some of them might not work. You might have a morning child who's very happy and happy to wake up in the morning and go to school. You have another child who's an evening person, struggles to, wake up in the morning. and can stay up all night. How do you balance the two? And that's where we would go back to, how do you leverage on your child's strengths, and how well do you know each child separately, and getting these kids to understand that they're all different in their own ways. We'll take questions for about, I think 5 to 10 minutes, because we started late. So if we can just take a few questions. Stacy, you can check for me in the chat in case there are questions, but you can raise up your hand and let's discuss this. Doreen, karibu sana. Who is a favored child? Doreen, karibu. You can, yeah, we can have comments, questions, views, perspectives on this topic. Who's caught themselves favoring one child and the other child called them out? Maybe you can share your story and how you handled it. And like I said earlier, those who have 3 children, those who have 1 child might not struggle, but 3 children, 2 children, 4, you know, it's something. If you're managing without these feelings, either catching yourself or being called out, that's beautiful. But if you have any story to share, please go ahead and just unmute and speak. Or a shared experience, that's good enough. Winnie, did I see you on the call? I wanted to hear a school experience. What happens for the teacher in front of Winnie? I think she dropped off. Sometimes I think as teachers, a teacher tends to favor that child who usually is well behaved, has all the answers, and what happens to the other children? Karibuni sana to unmute. Amy, how do you handle favoritism at home? This can both be you or with your children. Lilian, karibu sana. Amy, go ahead.
Okay, for me, I try to be fair. But it's a balance of different strategies, trying to be fair, trying to understand the different personalities and deal with them as they are, or even situational. Sometimes maybe they are fighting and you didn't see anything that happened.
Yeah.
And one of them is crying so much more than the other. You don't know who is really telling the truth, who is more aggrieved. So you really just try to handle the situation as it comes.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And Amy has my grandchildren, so they're 2 different personalities, but I think you've done a good job. They seem to get along. But again, the thing about siblings, I remember when my kids were young, they are 1.5 years apart. They used to fight a lot. And yes, when the fight is brought to you, you get everybody's version of the story. You don't even get to know who started the fight. And sometimes the fight could be about something you did or said or something you gave them and they're fighting over it. No, mommy said I'm the leader. No, mommy said I write better, I should do it. You know, and I think the hardest part is being able to take a back seat and say, okay, what really happened? And you have both of them talking. Those are really difficult moments, because how you make sure they both walk away feeling heard and that there was a fair judgment is very dicey. So thank you, Amy, for sharing that. Doreen, Ezra, Kenny, anyone who can share their story. Biko, Candy, how do you handle these things, or how did you, for those of you who grew up feeling unfavored or favored child, how did you handle it? And how are you changing things now for your children? And for those who don't have children, it can be your nieces, your nephews. There's that one niece or nephew who gets to visit more often, and when they visit, they get so many things, but the others are just, they're given one or two things and they get to compare. Did auntie buy you this? Did auntie take you to Java? Or, no, me, I wasn't taken. Oh, I don't think she loves me as much. Yeah. Views? Kendi, I was hoping you can share. I think it's tough for some of you because the children are right there, so maybe you can't actually share your views. They might pick what you're saying. Anyone? Okay, I can see we have about 3 to 5 minutes. Yes, Kenny, yeah, I know, right? Anyway, as you reflect on these things, true, yeah. True. So I think the most important thing, like we've discussed, is that we learn each of our children what are their strengths. You have a child who likes sharing, and then you have another child who doesn't like sharing, but they have a stronger area. How do you even have them teach each other and they end up being strong together? How do you foster the sibling relationships? Yeah, by having one child who's strong in one thing teach the other, or having them understand the other child. How do you have family meetings around a needy child and everybody's saying how they would like to be supported? I struggle to wake up in the morning. I would appreciate if whoever wakes up first can wake me up. Those are some of the things that help for the children not to feel that there's rivalry among them. And needless to say that we are human beings. Some of these scenarios we might not be able to, it's not like, it's inevitable. You might find yourself in a situation where, oops, what did I just do? It's just how do we correct that with the next action? If it's a gift you bought one child, it's okay for you the next day to say, yesterday they only had blue ones and today they had the orange one and the red one. So I was able to bring for you and you because I know you like color red and color blue. How do we become more conscious on our parenting and how it affects this particular dynamic of one child feeling favored and one child feeling unfavored? How are we careful to note that the favored child and the unfavored child both have unique experiences that are not always positive on either side? The favored child can end up feeling alienated. They can end up feeling lonely, up there where they are the favored child. And then the other children gang up against the favored child. Yeah. For example, if you have one child who's favored, then there are other 2 or 3 and they gang up against this child. So that child who once felt like they were privileged then ends up being a victim of bullying. And how these things then, as you grow up, you take these things into your jobs, you take them into your church environments, into your community environments, and they start affecting more people around you than just your family. It is in the house or in our homes where we can tame these things. It is in our houses where we can learn these strategies. It is where we can teach healthy relationships. And sometimes it starts with the parents. Yeah? How do we relate that helps our children see fairness? If as a father, I remember this one, my father used to get like 3 pieces of chicken and his own ugali and boga. And then the other pieces of chicken, we were given 1 each, and then our ugali was separate. Yeah, by the way, I thought that's how it was done in every family. And to date, I do not eat a drumstick. I will eat a chicken neck comfortably, but I will not eat a drumstick even if you paid me. You'd have to slice it into small pieces because I never knew that. So that was my experience. What was yours? And how are you making sure that your child does not have the same experience, especially negatively? That's our challenge tonight. And it's something for us to reflect on and also to educate the people around us who, as we are working on these strategies, might be doing the reverse and it tends to then pull us back a few steps when we think we are making progress. So I want to thank each and every one of you. I want to ask again, if you have any question, to please put your hand up or unmute. We can take a minute or two to answer a question. EmpowerWiz is a children empowerment company where we work with children to teach them life skills, but we also are cognizant that parents are our